Oh, I'm muted. Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Untitled themed experience entertainment design show. Wow, I'm already off to a great start, aren't I? My name is RJ Silva. I am your guest host today as we kick off AAPI Heritage Month. I am so excited to be here. I'm so excited to be part, finally, of the TETV universe, the cinematic universe. We're finally here. Let me turn on this ring light for you guys so you can see more of what I'm serving today. There you go. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are going to have an awesome discussion today. We're talking about pop culture, talking about representation and how we can show up and show out in our pop culture fandoms to show that we are here. I am RJ. That's my dog, Friedrich. I am RJ Silva. I am the co-creator of a website called the Ampliverse, which is a pop culture fandom, multimedia channel, website, podcast network, you name it, we'll do it. And I'm, like I said, I'm so excited to talk about pop culture here with you today, but I can't do it alone. I need the help and support of the culture. So I've got some great panelists today. We've got Rachel Nakamura and Cathy Nivera joining us up here. There they are.
Yay.
Hey.
Hi, RJ. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
of course. Introduce yourselves. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah. I guess I'll go first.
Yeah, go first, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. I'm the senior producer at one of the senior producers at TETV. I used to help produce this show, as well as So You're About to Graduate College, but now I help produce the Slice Creative Network's Freelancer Showcase, pre-recorded show. And I feel like discussing Asian American and Pacific Islander representation in themed entertainment is just really something that doesn't get an attention, or it doesn't merit a larger discussion. And I'm really happy that RJ is taking us on this really excellent exploration of what that means in pop culture.
Thanks.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cathy. I'm also one of the producers for TETV, and I produce Harriet Bee's Daughters. Outside of TETV, I'm also a designer within themed entertainment, and I'm just really also excited for this conversation because it really does come up a lot, but only when I say things. So
Absolutely.
I'm excited
So
to have
agree.
like-minded people to have this discussion and get your perspectives as well.
Yes, we're speaking out so it becomes normal. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. I'm so excited. Let's kick it off. So, Patrick and Annie asked me to come to the show because they wanted me to talk about the Ampliverse and like what caused me to help create this new like pop culture fandom website, podcast network, and kind of just overall became like a bigger discussion of like why do we feel the need to like be supportive and talk about the pop culture that we love. So it started off for me with this quote from a playwright that I love, Katori Hall. She's the showrunner of the TV show P-Valley. She also wrote the book to the Tina Turner musical. But she said this quote once that she said, I think that's the main reason why she got into storytelling is that I wanted to see myself. I started out as an actor in libraries trying to pull plays off the shelf that has scenes for me, and I couldn't find them. So I was like, I'm just going to write these plays then. And that's always been part of my journey. How can I revise the narrative? How can I add myself to the narrative? Because I do believe existence is resistance. And I took that last quote and ran with it. And I was like, that's it. That's I feel like the biggest thing that we can achieve as people of color, as AAPI, like, we need to show up and really be in the conversations and the discussions in the media to show that we are here as a way to kind of show that resistance. So the biggest question that I kind of like am putting out there with this panel is how do we show up and show out for ourselves and for the cultures we love and for the cultures we love and that speaks to us. And through my work at the Ampliverse and previously in the Ampliverse and my content creation, I do like food videos on YouTube, RJ Food Docs, but I also used to work in themed entertainment. I was with Disney for 5 years, being a producer. So in all of these paths that I've kind of opened up, there were two kind of like main things that I could see how we could show up and show out for ourselves. And one way is that to bring ourselves to the pop culture that we love and the discourse that it creates to fight these injustices that we see against AAPI, people of color, and other things that come through when we don't have marginalized voices in the discussion and the culture. And the other path is to produce safe spaces for creativity, advocacy, and collaboration, which is what I did with the Ampliverse. And honestly, it's what's happening right now at TETV. This is a great place where all those things can happen too. So let's dive in. What helped me kind of like set up the Ampliverse was that we really noticed this like idea of toxicity within pop culture spaces and fandoms. The first example that I can think of is that in today's pop culture, we can't help but feel discouraged by a lot of the pervading like toxic characteristics that we're seeing in fandoms. It's almost like there's like a fear of inclusivity, like a noticeable pushback from fans who consider themselves as that majority of that piece of pop culture. And it ends up keeping these universes exclusive, homogenized, or intimidating to newcomers. One of the main examples that I thought of when I was coming up with the Ampliverse was that there was that video game, The Last of Us 2, which is this like post-apocalyptic survival game that introduced a trans character that was not only like important and pivotal to the game's core narrative story, but it forced the players to see the reality of trans lives in a more comprehensible life and death scenario. And unfortunately, there were like fans that kind of swarmed the internet to blame like the voice actress and the writer for that character, and use that as a way to kind of like blame them to introduce like, quote unquote social justice fluff into the story. In one of the main examples that we really think about is the example with Kelly Marie Tran from the Star Wars Last Jedi. When the movie was released, her character Rose Tico was scrutinized online so viciously by like really diehard Star Wars quote unquote fans, to the point of misogynistic and racial insults and death threats that she actually shut down all of her social media. And she ended up expressing in an interview, I was an other, that I didn't belong and I wasn't good enough simply because I wasn't like them. In a more like close to home example, we're in some instances there is culture that is like subject to criticism. We see it all the time in the themed entertainment world. There's this like gatekeepy discourse that happens with like Disney is the main example we think about, but it happens all across different IPs and themed entertainment offerings. The Walt Disney Company, they're often protected by this like increasingly loud and aggressive defense from fans that immediately take any form of criticism as sort of like a typical like political correctness type of work. The one example that I obviously am thinking about is the Splash Mountain into the Princess and the Frog overlay. And I feel like we see that work happening outward, but in my experience with themed entertainment, a lot of the makeup for the teams, behind the scenes are still very much cis straight white, and opportunities for BIPOC, queer voices, and other marginalized voices aren't really there in the creative aspect, and not a lot of people are getting those opportunities. So I wanted to ask the panel, have there been other instances of toxicity within fandoms that you may have loved or experienced that has kept you from being a fan? Maybe with, some experiences against like these kind of gatekeepy experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is so much pressure on when we do see ourselves represented in, or like, at least for the AAPI community, when we see ourselves represented, we often don't get like multiple characters that will represent us. We get one character. And so this one character is like shouldering the burdens of an entire culture of not just one ethnicity, but there's so many ethnicities that make up AAPI people. And it needs to have, it can't be bad. You can't have a dud character, because it's not like we have so many that you'll just move on to the next one. There's so much hinging on that person. And I think that's really, hard on both the people writing it and also, the actors portraying it. But it's really hard on members of the fandom when they hear other people in said fandom saying, we don't like this person, because what they're really saying is, we don't like you. Like, even though they're not talking directly about me.
Rachel, you're hit. That's so true. I mean, I can't stop thinking about Rose Tico, obviously, right? Like in the Star Wars Last Jedi. It's how rare are we ever going to see an actual Asian person be in the whole Star Wars universe? And the fact that you can say what you want about the writing of the script or whatever. If that was not your favorite movie, then go ahead. You can just say you were not a fan of it. But I think the actual targeting of one actress as if it was her fault, but it was it's such a, I feel like for us, it's it's a deeper thing, because it's she's the only one that looks like us.
Yeah.
In this whole universe made up of planets. The fact that Ewoks have more representation than Asian people,
Absolutely. Because it's just and the frustrating part is she's not, when they get mad at the Kelly Marie Tran, it's not like she was in a position of power, especially a lot of AAPI people don't necessarily hold a lot of clout in Hollywood. So there's not really the opportunity to push back and say, this isn't written correctly, or this needs to be stronger in this way. It's kind of just take the breadcrumbs you're being thrown, and that you should be happy to even get this. And then there's that fear that when we do have maybe it doesn't land, this character isn't it received that well, then it's are they going to try again?
We're never gonna have one again.
We tried adding diversity once and we didn't like it, or everybody hated it, and by everybody we mean this particular group of people, and we're going to ignore the fact that maybe there was poor writing, maybe there were poor decisions made behind, maybe there's more than just it was an Asian person, but that's what we're going to condense this down to. And it's disheartening. I take it personally when I don't know if y'all had seen Mulan, the live action movie, I just took it so personally that it was, well, in my opinion, so they had this huge budget, or there was opportunity that I felt was so missed, and it just made me feel like this was supposed to be our one movie to enjoy ourselves, or this was something that was significant to me, the animated version at least, as a child. And then it's do I get another shot at it? Can you try again? Because this didn't do it for me. Go ahead, Cathy.
Squeaking his toy, by the way, if you can hear squeaks. Friedrich is very, very passionate about Mulan live action.
I was just agreeing with you. I didn't see Mulan because I didn't want to, but I read all of the critique on it, and so and it sucks that it feels like this is our one shot.
I think I think we're getting, I don't know if it's better, but it sucks that it's oh, now Asian stories are trendy. So oh, cool. Now we're getting Shang-Chi. We're getting the Kung Fu CW series. We're getting Raya, So it's we're reaping the benefits right now, but it's why can't this just be a default option for people? Why can't this just be a default option for pop culture and movies? Also, with the live action Mulan, where are the AAPI people writing the script? Where the director? It's all very much in the cast, but when you peel behind, peek behind the curtain, it's where are they?
That was the most whitewashed movie with so many Asians that I had ever seen. And this is okay. I don't want to say ever, because there's that the Avatar: The Last Airbender movie we don't talk about. that basically doesn't exist. But this was like one of the most egregious examples of how could they have, so many visually in front of the screen, so many Asian people, but fail to run it by even like one Asian person behind the scenes. Like there was so much that didn't add up that if they had just been more open, I think, to hearing criticism and being aware of the community in which they're, projecting this media. I know they want it to be this international thing, but it doesn't hurt to do like a quick sanity check with like any form of like hiring an AAPI researcher or bringing a consultant on. I think that's something that maybe it seems unnecessary, but those are the extra lengths it takes to make something genuine and make sure that it's received with authenticity.
Yeah. Yeah, and I even like when you were saying the idea that like we get one, like if you think about it, we are such a diaspora, my favorite word of all time. We are such a diaspora. Like when you choose one Asian person, it's like, are they Filipino? Are they Vietnamese? Are they Korean? Like how, like what is it's just you get one. And I do like that. I feel like now we are getting a little bit more specific with the representation that we're getting. Like I think back to like Minari, which is like one of my favorite movies, which like achieved a lot of success this year because it told a very specific like Korean American story. And then last year when we had The Farewell, that was a very specific Chinese American story. That I feel like we are finally starting to understand, like it's not just one blanket Asian identity as well. People are starting to get a little bit more specific now, which we stand.
Yeah, of course, I totally agree. It's like you wouldn't, it's so weird how all Asians get lumped in together when it's like you don't think of white cultures that way, or at least I've never experienced that way, where you're like, oh, you're German, I'm pretty sure you'll get along really well with the French person in this class. Like, that's not something that usually happens to people, but I've definitely gotten, oh, there's like one other Asian person here, you'll be really good friends. And I'm like, I mean, do we have anything in common? It's just, it's frustrating. Like, and I think it's important for, especially like for us to voice a need for more in-depth, like not just generic Asian person to fill this one diversity slot, but like something, there's richness to different cultures that maybe it seems all the same to people, but it's really not if you do a little more research and a little more digging. And I think people think of that as work, but there's so much to be gained by exploring that I think of it more, it's an opportunity to experience a richer world, experience something outside of what you are comfortable with or what you expect it to be true.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I don't even, it's like not even a little bit more research, just like some research would be very helpful in some cases. Like right now, I really love playing Zelda Breath of the Wild. Yes. If anyone has played that, I love open world games. So fun. Mm-hmm. And there's an armor set that Link wears, and it's like the Sheikah stealth armor, and like he literally wears chopsticks in his hair. And I'm like, I thought we moved past this, but okay.
I thought we've gone through this already. Oh, no.
And it sucks because that game is so good and so amazing in like so many other ways that it's like you put all the effort into making this brilliant game, but what about throwing like a small crumb our way of just like you could have removed that aspect and the game like that wasn't essential to the game's story, or the way in which, and it's not just like an overreaction of people aren't too sensitive. It's the people who say that have never had an experience where it was like a sour note or a bitter taste in their mouth was left, and they couldn't fully enjoy a thing because there was something that just didn't feel right. And I think it's, understanding that we would like to experience this without that sour note. We would like to, be able to fully enjoy things without having to worry that someone is going to say something that's just like, well, you're still other. Like, even though you're experiencing this, you're not really part of the vast market or majority that
Right.
was intended to receive this.
Well, now that we're kind of getting
Yeah.
into more, yeah, of like what we could do, or like what, just efforts that we could do. That kind of leads into the next thing, right? So like, what do we make of this? We are seeing all of these issues, all of these problems, but like, what can we do? What can we make of this? Because also like these experiences of these fandoms, although they are loud and vocal, they don't express the entire fan community that love those things, right? So like, often it is those like kind of like cis white voices that overpower the communities that can find strength and power and inspiration through a lot of the representation of like new characters, like what we said about Rose. There are, like kids out there that can finally see themselves as the heroes of these big movies, and I think we kind of like need to help combat that kind of idea for fans who genuinely find strength, power, and inspiration from this pop culture. So this is kind of like where I'm doing the like it's the name of the episode. We got to show up and show out, and I truly believe that like that's kind of like, what we really have to do is really be super proud and super just like show ourselves in our most genuine self, to be heard and seen and known, so that our perspectives aren't whitewashed, or will be assimilated in any case. I wanted to kind of like show like my story as an example for it. So like I moved to America when I was 13. I was the youngest of three siblings. My parents like moved here. They were already like 50 years old, but they wanted to, still move to America so that way I could graduate with an American degree, and my brother could live in America. And when I moved, like right before high school, basically, I was the youngest. I was also assimilating. I was the only one who studied in America, and I felt like this like struggle to like find an identity, and also at the same time felt the pressure to like fit in. I went to an all boys Catholic school, which, girl, we could talk about for that is content on its own. And so I was like trying to like not only like figure out my identity, like with my sexuality, but also like just me, who I was also still trying to kind of like downplay like my Filipino identity, because I was trying so hard to be like, I am a normal American teenager. And I wish I could go back and tell myself, like, just show up and show out, like all the things that you may love about your family, or like, just things about Filipino culture that you can show up and show out about yourself. I wish I could go back and tell. I don't actually wish to go back, but you know what I mean. I don't want to repeat high school all over again. But as I was kind of like going through thinking about that, and trying to find anything, like how can I kind of like tell myself or prove myself that there is something out there for me that I can kind of like take as inspiration and strength for myself, to be like, oh, I can be a genuine version of myself. And the one example I'm going to bring up is this. There was a TV show in the early 2000s called Degrassi: The Next Generation. And there was a character named Manny Santos, who is, I mean, for me, the first like Filipino character I ever saw on TV. Famously, the show is Canadian, so I guess she's Filipino North American. Her character arc during the show was that she started as kind of like the good girl, very, model minority myth, like that idea of like, she is just a, good student, makes good grades, doesn't like do whatever. And it almost kind of blossomed as a way for her to be like, wow, I actually look good, and I appreciate, like, I am proud of how I look. And, she valued herself, and she was very proud to show it off. So she basically transformed herself, had a full makeover, dressing trendier, showing herself off more. And as like a very insecure high school boy, I was like very captured by it. I was really enamored by the ability that someone could do that, especially someone who knew the pressure of being a good representation of what it means to be, Filipino or Asian, like Manny's character. And so, like thinking back, like, okay, it's kind of like opened myself up to like, there are positive like pop culture inspirations out there that, our community and other marginalized voices can kind of like pick up and learn from. One of the things that I recently found out was that there's this video game called Death by Daylight. I don't play it. I'm a scaredy cat, so I can't do it. But there is this game, and there was actually an article on Wired that did a whole exploration of why there were so many like queer youth that love to play this game and like really found like strength and inspiration from this game. So they like looked at a lot of different Twitch streamers and asked like what they kind of felt in kinship with the game. And article said that they created that they interviewed the people that created the game. And the idea of like the most successful survivors must combine their efforts to escape from the killer. And during COVID, and also just what it means to live as a queer person, where you feel alienated all the time, there's that communal gameplay sense that provides that like catharsis and release, which I thought was very like, that's true. Like, this is like pop culture at work, right? It's pop culture at work, helping people find inspiration and strength. More recently, I recently experienced it through my husband. So my husband, Adam, fell into BTS. Literally one viral video, like one Tiny Desk video, made him fully go full army, full BTS. He's seen all of the videos, seen all of the music. That's just like gone crazy. And I
spent all the money.
spent all the money. And I asked him, this was around the same time that we were creating Ampliverse. And I was like, you are literally the epitome of what I'm trying to do, the Ampliverse of like trying to help people amplify, why they love pop culture so much and why it like speaks to them and the strength and inspiration you pull from them. So I asked him like, what is it about BTS? And I wanted him to write. So he actually wrote an essay, and it ended up becoming an exploration of like his own eye-opening experience to his idea of what being a man is and masculinity, and what he had held back for years about his own preconceived notions of masculinity. And by seeing BTS be like positively male, like their positive male interactions with each other, and that sensitivity and their affection that they show to each other kind of like transformed his way of like thinking about his own masculinity and masculinity in general. And I was like, yes, like this is it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Like pop culture giving you like the strength and inspiration. So another question to throw out there, have there been pieces of pop culture that you may have found strength or inspiration in? Have they helped you become a more genuine or more proud version of yourself and in the different identities that we contain? Because we contain multitudes.
Yeah, Cathy. Okay,
I know.
Cathy has some really great earrings, so I thought we could talk about those. But we'll get to that in a second. Yeah, I think pieces of pop culture that I've found strength and inspiration in, seeing at least a little more representation of like seeing BTS be so successful and redefining the idea of what is cool or in pop culture, especially like the expectations of what a male rock star or what a male celebrity is expected to do, and like for example wearing makeup or wearing jewelry, having a more open relationship where you communicate your affection or emotions for other people more directly instead of just trying bottling that in. I think that's so much healthier in a lot of ways, and it's opening people up to the idea that communication doesn't have to be the way that it's been currently. You can use different forms of communication to talk to one another. Also, I think that especially like Asian men have been seen as like unattractive, or in pop culture been portrayed to be lesser,
like less attractive because they're not as masculine.
Yes.
And if you think about it now, it's like with BTS, because they are comfortable with their masculinity, like they're more quote unquote feminine like features is what make them so attractive, and what makes them so appealing globally.
Yeah, and I think like people are, people are starting to realize that the notion of what is conventionally attractive isn't necessarily what we're going to live with for the rest of our lives, or that's where people's money and minds are.
Right.
Like, being a fan of K-pop isn't just like only Asian people can be fans of K-pop, or only Korean people can be fans of K-pop. Like, it's, it turns out that you can have a wider perspective on this. You don't necessarily have to speak Korean to like enjoy the music or see, enjoy their performances. I think something that you and I and Cathy had discussed before was the idea of like Lunar New Year celebrations at theme parks, for example, and how like the way in which I celebrate Lunar New Year isn't as, as a Japanese American, like I appreciate that there's representation of at least some Asian culture, but the way I engage with Lunar New Year is like different than like a lot of my Chinese friends, or
totally.
Like the way in which we celebrate the New Year, like happens more in January and there's like more mochi involved. And, but even getting thrown things like that, it's something like it's like, this is better than it was when I was younger, where we didn't get like a Lunar New Year celebration at California Adventure. Like this is a step up. There's food here that like wouldn't have been here if it weren't for Lunar New Year representation.
Right.
And it's like we're moving a step in the right direction. I know some people are like, well, that should be enough, but it's like, okay, we don't have to, this isn't the only thing. We just have this one Lunar New Year celebration and we're good. That like we have represented all Asians everywhere. Like no worries, like we're like, this is progress, but let's get a bigger conversation going.
Yeah. It's like, we don't all have the dragon dance. That's the thing for one country. That's a very one thing. I'm curious though, have you ever had an experience with pop culture where it's like they got something very specific that literally immediately took you like, oh, whoa, like that is something I personally have experienced, that exact same thing, and like describe that feeling? Because I don't think a lot of people actually know what that's like, because there are a lot of things that are made for them and very few things made for us.
There was I know this was this is like a very specific thing.
Yes,
have you heard of Wong Fu Productions on YouTube? They're like, they've been they were like the only, I guess, early like YouTuber group that was producing like Asian skits, and like that, the people in it were, the actors and actresses were Asian, but they were also experiencing like, things that regular people, like mainstream media people experience, of falling in love or breaking up. They've done a few funny videos as well. And a few years ago, I remember they produced a video called Asian Bachelorette. And it was where they pointed out that they've only had 3 Asian guys on Bachelorette ever, and they all got sent out within the first week. And so it just became like a what if, I mean, the Bachelorette's still white, but what if all of the guys were Asian, and not just one kind of like East Asian, but like different kinds of Asian. And then the ways in which they were like having to take your shoes off at the door, like, and like everybody had to take a Pepsi before they started drinking. And I'm like, this is like, like that's specific to like things that, it's not just like a sort of, I mean, it is a bit of a generalization, but those are things that like I actually lived through, or that I laughed because I was like, oh, they get it. Like this is something that is written by like actual Asian people and is a lived experience. And then, being able to send that to like all of my, like so many of my Asian American friends, and being like, yo, this is like this is what happens whenever we go to your house, or, stuff like that. It's like those small touch points of like where you really connect, and the media, it doesn't have to be understood by everybody, but having those moments, I think that's something a lot of other people maybe take for granted when you see yourself represented all the time, but those are so valuable for us.
Yeah, there's like a lot, like for my experience, like being Filipino, we have a lot of like, Joe Coy is like one of like our most popular like Filipino stand-ups, and he's really like catapulted himself, and because he has like his Netflix specials, but his comedy is so specific of the like just like what it means to live with, like being with a Filipino mom, and like just, you know, and like yeah, I think cultural touch points is a really good thing, because, or like a good thing to bring up, because yeah, we are so starved for them. Like I know, like when I watched Raya and the Last Dragon, that was so specifically Southeast Asian that like it was funny, like watching it with my white friends and them being like, oh, that's new. And I'm like, yeah, like it's a new whole side of the whole diaspora, our favorite word again, of like, yeah, like that was you know, that's another, just a whole subcontinent of Asian cultures that finally, like, this is something that for them. I'm trying to think of other stuff too. I think like going into like the Lunar New Year, like I think that's what's hard sometimes about people's hesitation on using kind of like these cultural touchstones in their pop culture, because it's like it has to be nice, right? Like it has to be palatable. It has to be, I mean, I'm not going to say whitewashed, but essentially it needs to be something that's like easy for people to take, so that it's not a lot of like, wait, what is that? What is kanji? You know, what is like how, what is that? Or like something that's easy for, especially for like themed entertainment, like it's easy for tourists to just be able to like, great, I don't need the whole history. I can just see it. I can be it. I can completely understand it. But like, I know that's like a setback. And I mean, I even think about like movies from, you know, like Minari or The Farewell. These are movies that are fully subtitled, and now they are finally getting like very famous in the US market. And it's like, that was definitely something. Parasite, like literally a Best Picture, like movies that we don't even think about would work, because it's like we have to force people to read subtitles. And now it's like people are finally seeing like, oh, Korean cinema has been awesome all the time. Like, yeah, girl, they've been doing crazy stuff since they started making movies. And like, you know, like Bong Joon-ho's work, it's always been this like epic. So it's just interesting to like riding that wave, right? Like you see like what works commercially, and once it goes, it's like push as much content as possible. And I hate that that's what we have to do. It goes back to the whole trendy idea earlier. Like we have to wait until it's trendy to talk about mochi and boba and these things.
Yeah, and then even when it goes out of fashion, like, do we still get to talk about this? Like, it's not
Right.
like when it becomes unfashionable, we stop being Asian, and that we'll just
Oh, no!
we're just like, oh, you know, boba was so last year, or like, you know, being Asian is such a, like, what a fad that happened. Like, no, we're still Asian. Like, it's still something that's happening to us, even if people aren't necessarily aware of. There's all this nuance within the AAPI community, and you know, especially representations of Asians from Asia, or you know, as opposed to being an Asian American, it's just so different, and we kind of have combined them into this one big blob that I think it's, part of me wants to demand more, or at least better, but it's, I don't know if we can. I don't want to force people to like be afraid of trying to attempt to produce Asian content. I think it would just produce more, or do it more often, and then be open to hearing feedback and criticism on it. Because like, I don't expect you to turn out something perfect, but being open to like improving and not saying this is one and done, I'm doing it this way and I won't change. I think that's just so like something that isn't being explored yet. We're getting there, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. And what sucks is that like there are people out there writing these content, like making this content. It's just not getting that like push or like that investment. And I think like, yeah, we do get, you know, when we get movies like Raya or Minari, like we see them, and now like people are trying to look for that next thing, like the next Raya, the next Soul, the next whatever. And I think we just have to, you know, just keep making the things so that people will want to, you know, never give the impression that like we run out of things, or like we will stop being Asian if if we aren't picked up. There was one of the comments, Satria talked that Raya and the Last Dragon was it for them. Despite its film with multiple SCA cultures and not focused on one specific, I can recognize pattern, colors, and even behaviors that the character portrayed. Understanding that the conception of the film is to appeal to mostly people who has never been or understanding SCA. Totally agree. Like, I think that was, for me, like, I picked up certain things that, like, that is specifically Thai, that is specifically Filipino, which I loved. And I think, it gives that kind of, like, whole new depth and just a whole new universe. And like, that's, I think, we need these big things to kind of like open up, but now I think we need more of the content so that if people do like, oh, I loved Raya, I love the martial arts that they were doing, that was such like cool thing, the two sticks, the arnis, like, full disclosure, we had in the Philippines, we had like a full PE, like 5 weeks of just like learning our niece. Like, seeing that, I was like, wow, I'm aware of that. So yeah, I think like opening that up and it's just that like feeling of euphoria when you do see something specific. I like your idea of like, it's so good that I have to send it directly to the group chat. Like, it's that, like, that is
yes. Like, you've nailed it when you're not just like a think piece, but you're something that comes up in casual conversation with like real people. Like, then it's just a pop culture like event or a pop culture meme that you're sending around, which is how we interact with a lot of other media that doesn't have AAPI representation.
Right. Yeah. I think I have, you can see it back there, but I have a little Jollibee. Jollibee is a little like Filipino, it's like our McDonald's basically, but we have fried chicken and spaghetti that's sweet. But yeah, it's like, there's barely any Jollibee merchandise out there, but the first one that I saw, I'm like, I'm getting it. Like, because it's like, we don't get to see a lot of those. So we kind of like capitalize on whatever we get.
Yeah. And seeing those little moments, like, I think something that I think about is when people are like, well, I don't get in this culture. I don't like, that sounds like work for me to try and understand it. And it's like, well, we've been doing work, like everybody else is doing a lot of work to try and just come to your level or like imagine ourselves as this main character who doesn't look like us. And so if we've been, overextending to try and do that kind of work, I don't think it's too much to ask for someone to do a small amount of work in return, or just to meet us halfway on a lot of this.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Yeah, because it's not like, you can't find anything. It's out there. The content is rich out there. You just gotta meet us halfway. So, okay, going into this now, like, now that we've talked about like the pop culture that we love and has inspired us, and we found strength and inspiration from them. Now what? Now what we do? What can we create? How can we turn this into something that can be beneficial and help us out? And like I said earlier, like, I think creating safe spaces is, I think, one of the best ways that we can do that. To create that space so that we can exist, because we're there, and express and in turn resist any sort of like any connotations or false like media representations. We can finally create genuine representations of our cultures. One of the avenues that I found is through theater and storytelling. I graduated from theater. That's my background, my bread and butter. And theater ended up being like, an inclusive world where viewpoints and perspectives were open to be heard and produced. I was able to do theater here in Orlando. I went to college in Chicago, so very vibrant theater scene there. And being able to see this like through pop culture, of like being able to see like the use of theater and storytelling as a way to tell more genuine stories, I've really appreciated. So obviously we're going to talk about Hamilton, obviously, and that idea of like rewriting narratives to include the people that were obviously also there, but giving them kind of like a slice of that heritage or pride or victory or whatever you want to call it. in the creation of the nation. Another example that I want to bring up is Jingle Jangle, which is this like amazing Christmas movie musical on Netflix. And it's just this like beautiful, joyous film where like Black and brown talent get to explore and revel in this like Dickensian world. Like it's a very Charles Dickensy vibe, but like so colorful, like rich colors, vibrant colors. And it ultimately rewrites the expectations of what a Christmas movie can be. So I think like that idea of being able to turn stories that giving it like a new identity or a new point of view definitely kind of like helps create that safe space where people feel like, oh, I can do that with other stories as well. And then the other safe space, obviously, I'm going to talk about is the discourse of pop culture. And that's kind of where the Ampliverse began. Sometimes all it takes is to have a space to explore and express. So that's why we created the multimedia channel, the Ampliverse, where we amplify new and unheard voices and viewpoints as we discuss, critique, obsess, and celebrate pop culture. So our mission, we kind of created it as that the Ampliverse will serve as a safe space and haven where individuals can express and revel in their fandoms without the toxicity of exclusivity. We really wanted to like key in on that idea that like when you connect with culture, you should be able to share that with others and say like, look, this is why BTS is so important to me. This is why Animal Crossing is so important to me. Show it, and then sharing that like genuine connection to the pop culture creates that universe and safe space where other viewers and readers can see themselves represented through kind of like the openness of our creators. So cheap plug, here's like the quick slew of content that we have right now. So we have like a show called The Bourbon Study where we're kind of dismantling, very hoity-toity bourbon culture as something very much more accessible to people that may not be, like it's not your grandfather's like den drink anymore. It's cool. So other fandoms like Resonant Services, that's a podcast that we do with my friends and I, who are all very varying degree of gamers, from casual, like this is the only video game she's ever played, to someone who's played the previous Animal Crossing iterations before, where we kind of just, play a video game together and just enjoy ourselves in it. Frankly, Frankie is one of our content creators. He is a trans man who loves theme parks and pop culture, and he has a podcast called Frankly Frankie, where he talks about how pop culture and his passions and ultimately helped him define the identity that he felt so genuinely like akin to, that he wanted to like create that identity for himself and use that to help define himself. And he kind of goes through his transition experience to kind of like help people to understand, what it means and what you have to go through. Star Kids is another podcast that we have where my friends Ari and Terrence are learning astrology for the very first time and really making the discoveries that like, wow, the things that it's telling you, like the things that guide you to yourself actually resonate to them, and how you can, actually use it to be more self-reflective. And then we've got other shows too. We've got Harry Potter and the Anxious Millennials, where the hosts are rereading the Harry Potter series and seeing all the red flags that J.K. Rowling has clearly put in her books way before she started tweeting. So it's just them kind of like reading chapter by chapter and kind of like skirting the narrative and seeing like, wow, like look how we should have seen it from a long time ago. My co-creator Rhino has a podcast called Podcast Rangers, because he loves Power Rangers and the cultural impact of Power Rangers, which like honestly for me as a child, a Filipino child, seeing Trini Power Rangers and then like just fully changed my mind. I'm like, wow, like that's so cool. Speaking of like cultural touchstones, and we just have like other shows too, like Single Writer Podcast about dating in theme parks, Limited Time Yum, which is like the culture of food, and The Popsicle, which is a podcast I'm in where I basically talk about something new about pop culture every episode. So we're just beginning. We also have writing series like that essay that Adam wrote about BTS and other podcasts and YouTube shows. But like kind of like sharing it with you guys, like how I found like this space. I wanted to ask you, like, have there been outlets or safe spaces that you've discovered where you can exist and express? And also like what that means, right? Like how can people like find their own safe spaces or motivate them to kind of create, their own pop culture or their own way of connecting with culture so that they can show that they're out there too, like their perspectives and viewpoints are out there too. Also, Cathy, hi, welcome back.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for your patience with me as I literally live that, COVID grind by switching place to place to, connect digitally. But I guess I'll start off. I mean, like, wow. Professionally, like, TTV has been a really great space to be able to have these conversations, not to self-plug, but, like, it started a year ago, so it's, like, a wonderful example of how, like, if you don't see the space where you want to have conversations, like, and form a community, like, now's the time to create it because other people are also looking for those spaces. And I know also just like in my personal life, I really love Twitch. Like,
Yes.
It's at first like the idea of watching people streaming is like, oh, that's so long, or like, doesn't that sound boring or whatever? Hey. And it's really not, because it all has to do with like just connecting with people live and finding that community, whether it's like through a mutual interest in pop culture and then finally having that other connection, whether it's like this is also like a queer safe space, or this is like a POC space, or yeah. And for me, the way that I like to foster that community, at least in my own way, is that like I try and find other like people who are like me, either like whether they're POC or like they're a woman or whatever, or I try to not let them like wait for them to come to me. I really believe in like the idea of mentorship, and it's really hard for us. Like, I'm in this experience right now, like having to reach out to people to help me, whether it's like within my career, with whatever, it's hard for me to find people who look like me, who are in leadership positions. And so it's just a lot of me connecting with white cis men, but like, but like, I mean, if they'll connect with me, it helps. But because I'm also have been able to get to a place of privilege, or have I gotten so far in my career, I want to help those people, like, who, whether they're students or like, I know like I was in their place, but giving them like the safe space because I share their same perspective or similar experiences. So yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
That's
awesome.
Like, what you're saying is like the amount of like whitewashing I would try to do to myself to be as relatable and as palatable to cishet white men in positions of power, because I didn't want them to think of me as other. I wanted them to think of me as someone who could succeed in their world. Yep. And like I just like professionally for so long I just never discussed being Asian, or like I would occasionally like somebody else's post about being Asian American. I would never put it out there myself because I didn't want people to say that and then people to think, oh, this is the only thing she really cares about, or like I guess if I follow Rachel, that she's just gonna be somebody who always posts a lot of stuff about being Asian, and like that gets kind of annoying. Or like I wanted my voice to still be heard and given weight and given respect. And like especially after getting into TETV and meeting other AAPI people in themed entertainment, whereas before I was like how do I look as much like all the like legends of themed entertainment as possible? How do I become them as closely as I could? And realizing that, oh, there are other people in themed entertainment who look like me, and we're allowed to like voice our interest or voice our background, and it's not a detriment. It's actually something that adds depth, and it's more of a positive than it is a negative. I think, like, especially being able to have this conversation, this is something I would have never imagined possible just a few years ago when I was considering, I really wasn't going to go into themed entertainment altogether just because I didn't see people who looked like me. And I thought that means there's not really room for someone like me to succeed, or they're not interested in, like, they'd be more interested in somebody who would just be a cog in the machine, who wouldn't say anything, who would just go along and do what was asked. And I think, like, being able to open up like this and talk to Cathy and RJ about this, it's exciting. Like, it sounds like hard work of trying to get that representation, but it's also cool to see that people are on the same page, or like people are there with you and you share the struggle, and you have moments when something didn't hit you correctly and you want to commiserate with somebody and say that felt that wasn't how I wanted to receive that.
Yeah, there's something about, like, if we're just out here celebrating what we love or what inspires us or what we're like advocating for, if it's really something that clicks and we're just like, yes, we want to like fully support it, or like, you know, we laugh with it, we smile with it, we like have genuine conversations about it, that's literally already doing the work of like us showing that we're here and that we matter, that like positivity. And I know for me, like, I have to remember that too. Like, when I'm making a podcast at like 2 a.m. or editing a video, it's like I'm proving that I am enjoying this. And like by doing that, I'm like showing that, like, look, I am, if one person that's like, wow, I'm seeing Rachel and Cathy and RJ living their best life, that means that I could totally be there too. We had one comment about Satya about being in the Twice fandom. Like, I mean, if you want to talk K-pop, girl, let's do it. I mean, this whole BTS thing, like, that was the beginning for us, this household. But like, I went completely through like all of K-pop, and I just fully like just enveloped, and like, I mean, if you even think about it, like the whole industry is like, this country needs this industry to survive. Like, this is their export. Like, this is an actual thing that they're like, this provides our country like GDP so that we could live. I know, yeah, even for me, like, for the longest time, I was like, I don't want to listen to K-pop because I don't want to like, I don't know. I don't want to like say like, I am an Asian, I listen to K-pop, but it's like, it's bops. It's good music. Who am I to not like bop along to it? But yeah, it is that idea of like, yeah, I can just be genuinely celebratory for something that clicks with me. And we should do that. We got to do that for the culture. Rachel, Cathy, we got to do it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Oh, go ahead, Cathy.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, I think absolutely, like, especially during like when it was really, really hard and we were seeing a lot of AAPI hate, for me, like that Asian joy as resistance was like really powerful for me. So even though like I felt like I wanted to hide away and I didn't want to like share anything, or it felt like any joy that I had, like I should have kept to myself because it just didn't feel right, like that is even more reason to share that, because like like, yeah, like us loving things and like sharing in that joy with others, and also just like luxuriating in like the Asian experience, because it has its positives. I think is like an incredible form of liberation for me. So
yes, be free, Cathy. You can be free.
Yeah, I totally like seeing. I just wanted to briefly mention one of the TETV people who is moving on to another job, Emily Lee, who is awesome and also somebody who I'm so happy to have met through TETV.
Yes.
Like seeing she had done recently a like mocked up an idea for a boba shop that's themed after Big Hero 6 and would go in Disney Springs. And I didn't realize that there are things that I want and I don't know that till I see them when she's talking about, like it's mainstream media. It's some like boba is, I mean, for better or worse, trendy right now. But
totally.
the attention to detail of here are ways we can incorporate that into an actual experience that, it's not like you must be Asian to appreciate this Big Hero 6 shop. It's like, oh, I didn't know that we could explore that facet till she went out of her way to put that in the world and put that where it didn't exist before. Like, if nobody's going to make a Big Hero 6 boba shop concept, I'm going to do it. And then seeing the feedback that gets of like I texted her right after she had posted it because I thought just sharing it wasn't enough. I was like, no, this needs to exist. Like, you were speaking so directly to me and I feel seen. I feel like finally there's people are having conversations that regard the content and the media that I interact with. They're seeing a way in which we're more incorporated into that. And we're, as the audience, we're imagined with them and not just this world exists and I am a viewer and a spectator, but I'm not really a part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember seeing Emily post those pictures and I was like, ugh, where do I sign up? Who's Kickstarter are we paying? Who's hiring? Let's make it work. Shout out to Emily too. She helped brand the Ampliverse. She created the brand guidelines and the branding and the logo for Ampliverse and my YouTube channel, RJ's Food Rocks. She's amazing. Anyway, shout out to you. But we're landing the plane, as Patrick would say. We're landing the plane right now. I really do just want to thank everyone at TTV. Rachel, Cathy, thank you so much. And for letting me talk about pop culture for an hour. I can talk about pop culture for a lot longer, but I'm only giving the audience an hour because it's just going to get real specific after this. I mean, and we don't, let's not alienate. But I do want to say thank you to everyone here at TTV, Trevor and CJ in the background. Thank you for running the show. And to everyone watching, make sure you stay tuned to this month because we've got a lot of great shows coming up for this month, for AAPI Heritage Month and for Mental Health Awareness Month. We've got a lot of great speakers and a lot of panels and a lot of great content for you. So thank you so much. And hey, who knows? You might see me around more at TTV. But if you don't and you're like, okay, we've had enough of that guy.
No, we you are so well. I am so happy to talk with you. This, I don't know. The things I love most about TTV are being able to talk to you and talk to Cathy and have conversations like this where it's you don't have to be super formal, but there's something comfortable about exploring these perspectives.
Yes. If you guys want The View type talk show with Cathy, Rachel, and I, where we drink boba, we'll call it the boba. Say it on the comments below, and we'll be back soon. But thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this episode. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, RJ.